The next cost centre we're going to look at is 01.015, Surveying and Site Identification. So we use a licensed surveyor to put in markers showing, this particular one is showing the boundary. So they've subdivided a lot, and this peg will mark where the boundary is between lot 1 and lot 2 over here. We also use surveyors for confirming the height of blocks of land. So I'll just open a current set of plans here. Shall we just see this one? So here you can see the contour line. So a contour survey was provided to Elevate Design Studios, which is the drafting company that has prepared these plans for this particular job. So we would have been provided with a survey plan and a contour survey. So here you can see SP, which stands for survey plan, and that's the plan number of each of these particular lots. Okay, so because the subdivision hasn't gone through, you'll see all three numbers end in the same. So once that subdivision has gone through, there will be a new survey plan for lot 3. You can see a different lot here. So this one is RP, so it's a registered plan, and that's the plan number. So these contours basically provide heights for us to then work off of, which you can see here. You can see that we've got different heights noted on the plans, and you'll be able to see that even better through something like that. So that shows all the differences in the slab heights so that the drafting company can provide that information to us, just showing drop edges and things like that through there. Also noted from the surveyor is things like this stormwater line that's running through the back here that requires an easement. You've got a sewer line coming through here. So it just provides lengths of the building. So it's 41 metres along there and 10 metres along the back. And it highlights important details for us in terms of where we can position the house on the block and where it needs to be for different levels, and also if we need additional drainage from the different heights. So it's much higher up here than it is down here. So you can see from this number here is 34.16, and then it drops off to 31.10 at the back of the block, so much lower. And that shows that we need to put, things like silt fencing along here. We need retaining walls. We need the drop edge through the block, as you can see from the other set of plans. So we get a lot of information from the levels that are provided to us by the surveyor. And depends on the particular job of what's being provided by the time the sales estimator starts working on it, but all this information should be through before we actually start on site. So I just wanted to show as well, another thing that we get from our surveyors is your final height certificate. So if this house was sitting much higher than it was, we may be required by the certifier to provide a height certificate. So that would be something that is documented on, just grab one for you. All right. So this is just a copy of an email that Mel has sent through. So it's the conditions of approval, and you can see there that the surveyor's height certificate is required to be provided at frame stage, just confirming that the finished wall height is less than 7.5 in accordance with the Brisbane City Council Small Lot Code. So this relates to just houses in Brisbane City Council, which is the majority of what we're building. But if we were building outside of the Brisbane City Council, we would need to review that. So that could just be done through a postcode search for a non-standard Brisbane address. And then you've got the small lot code. So that applies to any houses that fall within the Brisbane City Council's small lot requirements. So that is where you would, so this is actually on the conditions of approval from the certifier. So unless you were building a very high house and you already saw that on these plans, it's way above here, that would need a relaxation anyway. So if it's a 3-story house, it would require a relaxation from Brisbane City Council regardless, and that would be something that would have to be noted in the tender document that it hadn't been included or it had been included. That would be a conversation to have with the drafting company, the architect, and also the salesperson for the project. So in this particular situation, if this was a 3-story building and sat up here, I would just contact Stephen from Elevate Design Studio and Blake, the salesperson for Lancon for this particular client, and just have a chat with them and say, look, this is sitting much higher than what the Brisbane City Council Small Lot Code allows as standard. Does the client have a relaxation for this house, or does it need to be included in the tender for them? So I'd just make it very clear that it had or hadn't been allowed. If it's sitting very close to this 7.5 line here, then I would put a note in and just say, look, we've allowed this as an amount. If it's not required, we will, it will not be required. So we can just provide that in a credit on the BA PCV, so the building approval post-contract variation. So that's a document that's done up by the sales estimator once we actually have the conditions of approval from the certifier. So if that wasn't there, then we could just refund them the money. It's not an issue. It's better for it to be there straight off the bat so that the client does know this sort of situation where the house is well under that line there, then I wouldn't include that in the sales estimate. I just include a note that it hasn't been allowed based on this set of plans, which shows that it's way under that line there. And if they made changes to the house and suddenly they wanted an extra parapet at the back here just for architectural continuity, then it would be clear that, okay, you've made a plan change. That plan change does actually affect the frame building height. So the finished wall height would actually impact that. And as you can see on our tender document, we advise that we didn't include a surveying height certificate to be provided for this house because the original plans weren't. So it's a much easier conversation to have with the client if it's clearly documented that, look, for this house here, this 12 Gotha Street, it wasn't included. The tender plans that we quoted off of showed that it was way under, so we didn't include it because we didn't want to put your job up. Now that you've changed the plans, it will be required based on the conditions of approval from your certifier. And they would have a copy of this. It should be sent to them, so you can just highlight that for them and just say, look, you can clearly see it wasn't included in our tender. It is actually required here for the certifier to approve your final sign off of your house. So that would be a really simple way to do that. And then we also have so we've got the final, that's the one there that I was just talking about, the final height and building position. Now you actually require 2 of these, one at frame stage and then one at final, and then you've got your natural ground levels and preliminary heights. That is normally provided by the client or by the drafting company in order to prepare these documents. So I wouldn't include it as standard. I would just note that it hasn't been included. It's normally quoted by Elevate Design Studio when they're initially drawing up the plans. It would have to be quite a basic set of plans or quite a preliminary concept from the client to not even have that sort of information. Often it would be provided when they purchase the land. So that would just be an item that I would just note it hasn't been included unless you have specifically been asked by the salesperson or by the drafting company that it's not going to be included by them and it should form part of your tender. So actually the building set out 30 point is the main one, that the only one that I would include as standard in a normal build. Now, so this one basically is your building set out. So this is when they have, so they've got their boundary pegs in. They know the rough location of the edges of the property. So they know they would normally have like 1, 2, 3, and 4 boundary pegs already noted. So what we want to know is where on this block of land is this actual house going? Where is the property actually forming? So once the building site has been cut, where are these corners for the concreter to work off of? Where do all those points actually sit so that they can actually start working off of this? So this is what this is why you would need, say, 30 points, is you'd want to know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you can see that you would need quite a lot of points. There might be other features that would need to be marked on a set of plans. So we don't really count that and pay per point. We just have a single item that covers them for up to 30 points. Now, this is for the building set out only. This is one visit with surveyors who will mark out. They will pop in pegs, usually offset. I'm not sure if I've got any ones that I can show you where it's offset. So they'll actually show, let me just see if I can see. A little, so they mark them a little bit further away from the building so that they can actually, this is probably a terrible one, but that shows your offset. So they wouldn't actually put in the lengths of timber here, but they would put the pegs slightly further back from where they're actually required. So that would mark the corner of the building there, so that they could actually dig the holes and things like that for the main slab. Now, why I say there is only one building set out is we don't include in our standard pricing for our sales estimate footings and piers. If you have engineering prior to completing a sales estimate, you should add additional items here for footings and piers. So if I was doing a sales estimate for this particular job and I did have the engineering showing that there were footings and piers, I would just carry down an item here and make that one 4. So I would just do that one would be footings and piers. If I could spell properly. And then that one there would be slab. For additional slabs, so when you have a development which has buildings on different sides of the property, so let me just see. Let me see. Okay, so say this was a townhouse development. So you had a set of units over here and a set of units over here. You would require additional building set outs. in a perfect world, all of these slabs would be poured at the same time. But for sales estimate purposes, you couldn't necessarily guarantee that all of this would be poured at the same time. So if you had multiple slabs here, they may, as a sales estimator, you don't know who's going to be working on that particular development. You don't know if we're going to have a very large concrete gang that is going to be able to pour all these slabs at the same time. In order to excavate the footings and piers for this slab, they might start knocking out pegs over here. So as a rule, I would just allow one quantity per slab per visit. So if you had the engineering for a set of townhouses like this one, so you can see there's 1, 2, 3 slabs. I'm guessing there's footings and piers underneath all of these, then I would allow 6 visits. That way, you're more than covered for any additional visits. So that would be that one. In the example of this being a townhouse development, okay, so we'll make that 3 and we'll make that 3. So that's our 3 visits for footings and piers. So if they wanted to do, the side ones and leave the middle, not bother pegging it out because it's going to get all destroyed when they're actually trying to get vehicles in. I mean, a lot of these are very narrow to actually get vehicles, concrete trucks, pumps, things like that. If they needed to bring them up closer, if the pegs get knocked out, you've got to get someone back in to remark them anyway. So it just allows you a little bit of flexibility. If this was a townhouse project like that, I would definitely be needing 3 height certificates. And then this one, I would probably delete out. If I already had a set of plans and engineering, they would already have that information. So that would be how I would do up this cost center if I was pricing a townhouse development like this. You're well covered then that anything along here. Now, the other one would be if you had lots of retaining walls. So the retaining walls often will go in at the very start. So they would cut the block with all the different levels. So they'd have a level here, a level here. There's not really retaining walls on this one to kind of show you, but if there was lots of retaining walls, particularly this site here has a lot of retaining walls running all the way along here that are existing, and then we're popping in some more along here and all the way along here, they would be done first. So all of these retaining walls here were done even before much work was actually started on this site. That lets us get in. So it is important because there's no slab, there's nothing for the concrete wall. It's actually timber on this particular house. There was nothing for this guy to work off of in terms of heights and lengths. Often, you've maybe got a boundary marker up here and something maybe down the bottom. So for him to get started, it is a good idea to have an additional visit noted here. So I would just do 1 for the retaining walls. That way there's no question, that's definitely covered, that those retaining walls could easily get pegged just to make sure that the final heights and things like that, because there's nothing, he can't measure this distance in between here to go, okay, well, that should be there and that pad height here. Okay, I need to finish roughly the same height as that. None of that is there. He's basically just rocking up to an empty site that could maybe not even be cut yet. So he's really just rocking up and going, well, what am I doing here? So it's really important. It's very important for retaining walls as they're on the boundaries to actually be marked, where the boundary is between the two properties. In terms of the actual location, we don't want to build on a neighbour's property. And then, so that's the kind of typical marker that's actually noted that they would then work their heights off of. So there would maybe be a marker up here in the street, might be noted on the plans that you've got, and then they work their heights based on that. So you'd have a marker here, and that would have the number, the actual height that they've managed to get here. So they would have a marker that they're working off of, that would look similar to that, maybe in the street or on the footpath. And then they would have their boundary marker, and then they would put in some markers on the sides of, basically corners and things like that, so that we can make sure that we're building within the right location. So that would be how I would do something like that for all the retaining walls. Could get pegged out at the same time. There's generally going to be one contractor, and they would manage any offsets that they required in order to put the walls in. So that would be, if I had a nice big development of 3 separate slabs, that would be how I would do that cost centre, and that is well covered, and it would be easy for a supervisor to work within that.